Whoops.
Thinking about buying a brand new home? Well, you might want to reconsider. From hidden costs to major headaches, new construction homes are full of surprises. In this video, I'm going to share 5 things that no one talks about when it comes to new construction. And along with that, I'll be showing you real life examples from home inspectors as well as homeowners. We're actually going to be looking at a few videos from Cy Porter, who's a home inspector that posts a lot of videos on social media. In fact, he's getting sued by a couple of different builders right now for exposing some of the poor construction that comes along with buying a new home. And that's exactly where we're going to start today's video, but make sure you stay tuned to the end where we talk about one of the biggest surprises that a lot of homeowners get several months down the road after buying a new construction home.
Riser strap not installed. Broken. Riser strap not installed. Broken. But don't worry, Inspector JW said the final inspection was approved. Not only do they paint over tape, they actually stucco over your tape. This stucco is rated for chickens. That's why you can see the chicken wire through all the stucco. Pretty impressive, isn't it? The shower's cracked. The tab is broken. The enclosure leaks because they didn't install it correctly.
One of the cool things about new construction is that everything is new, and that's why a lot of homeowners out there believe that they don't need a home inspection when it comes to buying a new home. And those videos that you just watched are the reason that you should hire your own inspector before you ever close on that home. Understand that builders are in the business of making money, which essentially means time is of the essence. So the longer it takes them to build a home, the more money they're losing. And that's one of the main reasons that we're seeing so many issues when it comes to new constructions, because builders are building for quantity rather than quality. So if you're someone that's considering new construction, just make sure you're doing your due diligence prior to closing on that home. If the builder tells you that they're going to fix those issues but want you to close first, then I would actually push back and say, no, I'm not closing on this home until all of these things are completed. Because even though that builder might be planning to do those things, they might not be planning to do it on your timeline. And the very last thing you want to do is buy a new construction home that actually needs work.
Home inspection.
Walking to the house. This is what I saw. I could not believe it. Look at this.
Doesn't even have cooling. These need rain caps.
And that's going to bring me into my second point when talking about new construction. A lot of people don't understand when you buy new construction, you're essentially just buying the shell of the home. Yeah, it has walls. Yes, it has countertops and bathrooms and all of that stuff. But in many cases, it doesn't have blinds. It doesn't have shutters. It doesn't have any window treatments. It probably doesn't have any landscaping in the backyard. In some cases, it might not have any in the front, on top of being very, very vanilla. And the reason I bring this up is because buying a home is an emotional process. People look at the newness factor, they look at all of the things they love about the property, but they never factor in all of the additional things that they have to do after they move in. And typically when you're buying an existing construction home, you're not having to put in new landscaping. You're not having to paint the walls a different color and put blinds up and do all of these different things like you are with new home. In fact, a lot of the upgrades that you see in the model homes are exactly that. They're upgrades. And unless you decide to spend the additional money upgrading the property that you're buying, then chances are it's going to look a lot different than the home you initially walked through. So do not buy new construction until you factor in all of the things that you're going to have to do to your property to make it your own. That's one of the biggest complaints that I hear from people that buy new construction, is that it ended up costing a lot more money than they had initially thought because of all of the additional things they had to do after they ended up closing on that property. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is depreciation and resale value. This is something one of my clients is actually going through at the moment. They purchased a home back in 2022 in a new community here in Huntington Beach. And while they were one of the first people to actually close in the community and reap the rewards of the appreciation of the other units actually closing later on, they're now in a position where they can't sell their house at that value because there are other homeowners in the community trying to do the exact same thing. And that's one thing you need to be aware of when buying new construction. And that's because a lot of the people that buy in the earlier phases and see that gain in equity, they're the first people to want to sell once the builder is done selling all the units. And that's essentially what's happening in this community. community, on top of there being some issues with regards to parking and people just not liking the community as much as they thought they would. So in this specific example, my client purchased the property for just over $1.3 million, and as of today, on paper, it's worth just over $1.5. But here's the caveat. There's 3 other listings just like their property in the community for sale at a similar price, and they're not moving at all, which is creating a really big issue for my client. Now, they're in a position where they can rent or sell, but the rent that they need to charge in order to cover their monthly mortgage is higher than most people out there are willing to pay. And in order to sell that property, they're going to have to drop the value significantly lower than the other homes listed in that community, which in turn would affect everyone's value in there. So just be careful if you're buying new construction that you still have that longer term time horizon. Just because you have built up equity from the time you signed that contract to the time that it was built doesn't mean that you actually have money in your pocket. And I know a lot of people out there are looking at Zillow and watching their home go up and up and up in value and thinking that they've just killed it because they timed the market perfectly. Understand that that money is not your money until that property is sold. So if you're planning on buying new construction, you still need that longer term time horizon, especially when you're in a market like we are at the moment, where homes have appreciated so much in such a quick period of time that we need things to actually normalize a little bit. We need prices to stabilize. And with inventory up and interest rates up, buyer demand has backed off a little bit, which in turn means there's less buyers out there looking, especially when it comes to this type of property. And that's exactly what I want to talk about in the 4th reason that you should stay away from new construction. When it comes to buying a home, location is the most important thing. But when it comes to new construction, location is often overlooked. And what I mean by that is when builders are building new construction communities, they're often building them further and further away from the epicenter where everything is located. And the primary reason for that is because those areas have already been built out. Most of the land that's available is actually on the outskirts of these areas, which means not only are these areas not developed, but they're further and further away from where you're typically going to spend your time. And sometimes that has to deal with commuting to work, and sometimes it has to deal with going to dinner with friends, or in some cases, visiting family. But before you buy a new construction home, just make sure you understand where it's actually located. In fact, I had some family members recently purchase a home here in South Orange County in a community called Rancho Mission Viejo. Now, this is a newer community that's just been built out over the last 5 to 7 years. And one of the nice things about the community is that everything is new. You have new schools, you have new parks, you have new streets, but at the same time, that community is way out of the way. And that's because here in Orange County, we don't have a lot of available buildable land. So in order for builders to build a new community, they have to go where the land is actually available. And in this case, in my opinion, it's not the ideal location. Now, if you're somebody that stays home a lot, you don't really leave, you just stay in your community, it's probably not a big deal. But if you're someone that has to be on the freeway for work every day, you like to go visit friends on the weekends, you're always out and about doing different things, then location is everything when it comes to buying a new home. On top of that, one of the other downsides to buying new construction is that most builders these days are trying to maximize their lot size, which means they're building up, which is resulting in 2 to 3 story homes on much smaller lots with very little yards. And while some people might not care about these smaller lots, what I will tell you is that when you go to sell that home later in the future, it's going to affect your resale value. And that's because when buyers have an option between a nice single level home on a large lot versus a 2 to 3 story home on a smaller lot in an inferior location, people are going to choose option A. So just be very, very careful before you buy new construction that you're not only weighing the pros of new construction, but you're also weighing those cons. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in that surprise that I mentioned earlier in the video also has to do with location. Remember earlier I said when they're building these communities further and further away from the epicenter, they're having to build new streets. They're having to build new schools and shopping centers and essentially build an entire city around these new developments. Well, guess how that gets paid? It actually gets paid by the homeowners who are buying in those cities. And that's one of the biggest downsides of buying new construction is that Mello-Roos tax that gets added onto your property taxes. And here in California, it can take your base property taxes from 1% and in some cases double it. And the problem with that tax is most of the time it's a 25 to 35 year bond, which means until that bond is paid in full, you're paying for all of those improvements whenever you pay your property tax, making the cost of that new construction infinitely more expensive than an existing home. So be very, very careful when you close on new construction because chances are you're going to get a supplemental tax bill just a few months after closing. And the reason for that is because the county has essentially assessed that tax value on vacant land, not factoring in the value of your home. So once you end up closing on that home and they reassess those taxes, you're likely to get a surprise bill in the mail. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean you should just avoid new construction and run out and buy a resale home, because resale homes have a lot of issues too. In fact, you can check it out in this video here.